Do you believe art can change the world? So do I. On this show, we meet artists whose work is doing just that. Welcome to Art Heals All Wounds. I'm your host, Pam Uzel. Have you ever thought that your life experience would be good material for a novel? Well, my guest on today's episode thought that, and she was right. In fact, she has enough experience for several novels. Water Mamas, written by Mona Shomali, is set in the not-so-distant future where there's worldwide drought. Conditions are especially dire in the Amazon, our planet's lungs. A young United Nations representative is given the mission to convince indigenous tribes who still live in the shrinking patches of forest to approve a cloud seeding project that could potentially bring the forest back. Using her experiences in indigenous human rights and environmental science, Mona weaves together the complex intersection of human rights, climate science, and spirituality. There is no easy answer. After reading this book, I came away with lots of feelings and no definite conclusion. This book asks us to grapple with the assumptions that are made by many of us about the right approach for the planet. You want to know how you can really help me keep this show going? Follow me on your favorite listening app. So easy, right? And if you really want to give the show a boost, leave me a 5-star rating or review. Hi, Mona. Thank you so much for being on Art Heals All Wounds. You wrote a book called Water Mamas that I am very excited to talk to you about.
I'm excited too.
One thing before we get into this book, can you talk a little bit about your background? First of all, you are an incredible visual artist. You paint, and your paintings are incredible. But you also have a lot of other things that would inform the writing of this book that I hope you'll talk about.
Yes. So I spent 5 years in New York City as an academic. I was a college professor and I taught courses such as Indigenous human rights in the Amazon and international environmental governance. And I did all my graduate work on international Indigenous human rights. And that focus came out of my work experience being a case researcher for Sarayaku versus Ecuador, which was a landmark case in the Inter-American Court of Human Rights, where the Sarayaku tribe, the Kichwa people, sued the government. I shouldn't say the Sarayaku, the Kichwa of Sarayaku sued the government of Ecuador for illegally allowing oil drilling on their land. And so I was a case researcher for that case. And so as I was working with them, I really thought to myself, this is something I want to pursue professionally. Like I really want to be someone who provides access to Indigenous people who are trying to establish their human rights in this era of exploitation and in the Amazon. So fast forward again. So then I taught it. And then as I was teaching the courses, I was also coming across this tension between environmentalists and Indigenous peoples who had written a letter in Cultural Survival magazine saying, we do not give license to environmental groups to speak for us. And it was this long letter, and I read this letter, And I had referenced it in my master's thesis at NYU, and it just always was in the back of my head that people have collapsed sort of the white Western environmentalists with indigenous people when they actually have very frequently been at odds. And so I, you know, left New York, I stopped being a professor, and I knew I wanted to do something around these issues. And so I first wrote a nonfiction book exploring these issues. And basically, everyone.
Wait, what's the name of that
That
book?
book was
Tell us the name of
called
that book.
A Guide to Ecology and Social Justice. It never made it, it never saw the light of day, but I wrote that book, and it was basically on these themes and that I'm discussing, and I had put in a few other things like farm workers and chemicals, and like the fight of farm workers to have some type of protection, like things that were adjacent to this issue, indigenous human rights I had included. And so that book I started to pass around to my friends, and they were like, Mona, this is so boring. This is just like the most boring book we have ever seen or heard of or read. This is just so boring. So then I decided that I needed to turn this nonfiction information into a work of fiction with a story arc where I would develop characters, where there would be multiple plot lines, where there would be some suspense. And I just had this resolute, belief that I needed to write this fiction book to explore the nonfiction themes that I had originally wanted to teach. And so I hired an editor, and she was so on board. She really saw my vision. And we must have done 7 drafts together. Shout out to Dana Bennett. We did so many drafts together, and she really, really helped me get to a place where I was doing storytelling and not just fact dumping. Because often I wanted to share a whole bunch of facts, and she was like, no, this is awful. This is not what we're going to do here. So I had a lot of really great coaching from the editor, and I finally came up with a book that I felt was compelling to read, that was exciting and had all these facts about international human rights law in it.
I think that's a great setup to start talking about this book. It's called Water Mamas. And I'm wondering where to start. I want to talk about kind of the different sides. Well, first of all, let's talk about what is the issue being proposed in this story.
So this is a time in the near distant future where there are government bodies that are proposing a geoengineering plan of artificial rain to fall in the Amazon, to bring back rain to the Amazon, where currently there's only rain in small patches where indigenous people live. And according to international human rights law as it stands now, indigenous people have to give their consent to mega projects on their land. And so the main protagonist is a UN employee, and she tries to get the consent, and one of the tribes, the Macuxi, does not want to give consent because they fear their water mamas, their forest and water spirits, will be negatively affected by this geoengineering cloud seeding, as it's called, the artificial rain, which already exists and is used all throughout the world, including in California and the high Sierras, China. It was used in Australia, but the Australian population fought against it, so they halted the program. So it is controversial, which is why I chose it, because I wanted some type of climate crisis controversy, something that would pit one set of morals against another. I really wanted there to be like a moral struggle for the main character, and so I chose geoengineering.
Yes, which is what makes this so complicated, in that I think a lot of us kind of have a sort of like, or okay, I'm only going to speak for myself. When I hear geoengineering, I have a bit of a reaction to it, in that I feel like we're kind of experimenting with our ecosystem on the one hand. On the other hand, hey, we need
Mhm.
rain. And so you don't make this black or white, because you do include that the people who are using this are really, really
Yes.
happy, and that it's working for
Yes, it
them.
brings back seasons. I mentioned in the book that it's brought back seasons for many countries and states that were experiencing drought.
Right. And the other place where you don't make it black and white is that a lot of the other indigenous people in the Amazon do
Yes.
want it.
Yes, the other tribes do want it. So that is also very concurrent with oil projects in the Amazon, is that there are some tribes that want it and other tribes that don't. And so as someone who I worked for the Center for Economic and Social Rights out of Quito in Ecuador. I actually went to a meeting where different tribes were arguing about whether to let oil projects in. And I think I was so impacted by that argument because I think it goes back to that sort of noble savage image that a lot of Western environmentalists have, which is like, oh, well, of course they'd be against oil. But it's like, no, there are actually some people who say, they've been quoted as saying, we want hospitals, we want schools, we want roads. And so I just don't want to present things any different than they are, which is that it's complex and there's parts of modernity that indigenous people want and parts that they don't, and different tribes have different views. And I just want to sort of get away from this view that one type of person has one type of belief. Um, I really wanted to explore the idea of how complex it is, accepting modernity, not accepting modernity. These are kind of the issues that I was wrestling with in my career. And I really wanted to write a book that would present these moral issues to the audience.
Right. And the other thing that's interesting, and we're going to back up a little bit and talk about the protagonist soon, but I just want to keep sharing my thoughts that were around this, is that you don't ever take a stand on whether or not this cloud seeding is harmful or
No.
not. You never say, oh, this could harm this, or, oh, it's great, or, oh, it's, you never take
Mm-mm.
that stand. It is really not about, whether it's a harmful practice.
Yes.
So, yes. And that, for me as the reader, made this really challenging.
Yes.
Because also, okay, let's go to the protagonist now. Your protagonist, Afa, am I pronouncing it the way that you would pronounce it?
I would say Afa, but Afa's
Afa.
fine. I mean it.
No, let's say Afa.
Okay.
Afa's nicer. Um, so Afa has a really interesting backstory. Can you share just a little bit about her backstory?
Yes, she is from a South Pacific island that has gone under due to sea level rise. And that actually also comes from my work experience because I used to be an environmental policy analyst for this group called Islands First that was lobbying the UN on behalf of AOSIS, which is the Association of Small Island States. Um, they were a group of small islands that knew they were going to go extinct and go under for sea level rise. And they were trying to organize environmental refugee status in places like Australia. They were trying to establish environmental refugee status at the UN. And so, out of that work experience, I also sort of dovetailed that into the book where she was coming from an island that had gone under. And so she had this view of we have to do something before your habitat is gone. So I wanted to put her in a position where she was, really seeing the point of mitigating climate change before it was too late. But I also wanted her to connect so much to the people that when they said they didn't want the program, she was torn and felt loyalty to the community. So I was trying to create a backstory where she kind of came into it with a perspective of really trying to, save, I'm using air quotes for people who can't see the podcast, save this rainforest habitat ecosystem, and then coming to a perspective of, well, this has to do with self-determination and agency and, of the people versus technocratic elite scientists who are geoengineering. So kind of that tension.
Right. And it gives her this certain credibility too, in that this is not theoretical for her. And there is a whole emotional component in that her family did not evacuate the island very early on, and it was quite traumatic
Yes.
for her.
Yes, her family was one of the last to leave. Her mother wanted to leave, but the father insisted on staying till the last minute, and it was very traumatic for her. And I wanted to create a backstory that made it so that she was really invested in helping them. What helping them meant, I wanted to explore as a nebulous gray area. Like, what does help actually mean? What is support? What is capacity building? What is assistance? What do those things mean? And so I did want her to be in a position where she was invested in some type of creation of a better scenario, is the way I'll put it.
Mm. Yes, she's very, very, very sincere to all parties that she's answerable to, which again adds to the conflict because at a certain point she really has to make a choice over where she is going to put her loyalty and what she's going to fight for. I don't want to give too much away about the ultimate outcome of this, but I do just want to explore feelings around this story. I found myself with a lot of really strong feelings.
That's what I've heard from a lot of readers.
Yeah, you really do. At a certain point, I just felt like to the one tribe that was holding out, I felt so frustrated with them.
Yeah.
Because it's like and they did have the best patch of the Amazon that was left.
They did have the, yes.
And I sort of the things you include in the book echoed my feelings reading it, like, you're so selfish, don't you want to save the world?
Exactly.
And I found myself feeling that as well, like, everybody else, all the other tribes are on board, why aren't you? But you have this one scene, I don't want to give it away too much, but it's kind of a scary spiritual experience for Afa. Do you know which scene I'm talking about?
Let me think. Is it a dream sequence? Yes, I know
Yes.
what you're talking about.
It's scary.
Yeah, yeah. It's funny because my editor really, really pushed for that. She had the vision around that. She was like, let's write a dream sequence with the following. And so I will give her credit. She really felt that would be momentous.
But there's a sense too when you read it that it's more than a dream sequence.
Yes.
It's actually could, because she at this point seems to be very much a New York City woman,
Yes.
and she is here in the Amazon where it's very sweaty and sticky, and she's being bitten by bugs and all kinds of things. She actually gets somewhat injured by some parasites that are there.
Yes. Which happened to me, by the way. All those things happened to me.
Oh, so interesting. I just thought of, this is a bit of a tangent, but we went to Hawaii and we hiked up PPY, and the people we met there who came in flip-flops, like little like silver lame sandals, brand new leather Nikes. It was just like where did you think you were coming to? And that's
Yeah.
sort of where she's like, except much more, many more things than just going on this trail in Hawaii. Like she's dressing for maybe summer in New York and
Yes.
she's not prepared. And really, she has some encounters with nature that are not pleasant.
Yes.
And so, in the middle of, how you feel if you're in this place and you're experiencing illness, she has, okay, it could be a dream sequence, but there's also a sense that maybe it was a vision and maybe
Yes.
it was actually happened.
Yes. All of those things are true.
It's not clear and it's scary.
Yes.
It's scary. And if you expect these benevolent water mamas to come have a nice chat with you about why you should or shouldn't do something, that's not what she gets.
No.
And it really, that was an interesting point too, where it's like, wow, that is, and she kind of wakes up befuddled. She's not really sure what happened. I feel like she's not sure of, was it a dream? Was it something more than a dream?
Right. That's how I wrote it. Yeah.
Yeah. So this seems like a real turning point for her.
Right.
This thing of like scared straight. Like, you have an agenda, you're not listening, and I'm going to make you listen.
It's important to mention that the Macuxi culture historically does actually believe in water mamas. I don't want to speak to people today. I can't speak to how young people are interacting with mythology, but their own mythology historically has been that if you upset or anger the water mamas, they will bring sickness to the tribe and even will take people under and kill them. And so that is historically, to prepare for this novel, I actually read an anthropologist's account of the Macuxi mythology that he had intensely researched with the Macuxi. And I had lived with the Macuxi at Iwo Krama. And so when I left, I was like, okay, let me get really inside of this mythology and this I really regret not writing down his name, but this great academic really got on paper the details of what happens if you upset these water mamas, and it is not good. They just bring sickness and death to the community. So that's why I felt it was such a great vehicle for the story, because in my time with the Macuxi, the science station that they live in or manage, the eco tourism site that they manage, is modeled after Iwo Krama, which is a real science station / eco tourism station that is partly managed by the Macuxi in Guyana in real life. And so it was modeled after that. So, I have a friend who works at Iwo Krama, and she was reading the book and she was like, this is basically us. So one thing about the book is that there are parts of it that are almost entirely based on reality.
Wow. Yeah, that's interesting because that's another thing, is that Afa is not treated to the tourist version
No.
of of this during this visit at all, which is probably why she gets ill and all this stuff. She also I don't want to get too divisive between the men and women characters in this book, but I feel like you do have the environmentalist at the UN who is very like hard and determined, and that we have to get them to agree. That is her mission.
Yeah.
It's not like a listening mission. It is
No.
like, your job is to go down there and convince them that they have to accept
To
this.
get consent at all costs.
Exactly. And then there is another, is he a biologist?
Yes. Yes.
Her crush at the,
Yes.
yes, and that he's a tricky character too, which I really kept changing how I felt about him.
Yes. And that was based on a real person as well, who I encountered, who also was a part of my journey in working with the Macuxi. And in real life, I kept changing how I viewed him. And so I wrote him into the story as a vehicle for a lot of Afa's discoveries. But I think in so many ways, my thoughts of him are, they go back and forth. And so I wrote him like that, that you go back and forth in how you view him.
Right, because in a certain sense, he could be a great ally and mentor in terms of her choice to respect the rights of the Macuxi, but it's complicated.
Yeah.
It's very complicated.
I wanted to express so many things in this book, like different things, different themes. And, I'm in my 40s and I became single after my divorce in my mid 30s. And, not to give too much away, but in the book, this character, he is non-monogamous. And it's something she has to, decide, do I want to be a part of this lifestyle? And when I came back to the Bay Area from New York and then London, where I lived, I came back and I just felt like every guy I met was non-monogamous. And I was like, wow, have things changed so much since I was single? Everyone is non-monogamous.
No,
Um,
that's I've been in the Bay Area for since 1988. That's a Bay Area thing. I will say.
yeah, and I just came back.
That's my experience is that that's a Bay
But
Area
I
thing.
will say that the person that character is based on in Guyana was also non-monogamous in Guyana.
Hmm.
And so he was non-monogamous, and then I came back to the Bay Area. Every guy was non-monogamous. So I felt like I wanted to explore, even though the book was about indigenous human rights and spirituality and climate change, I did kind of want to throw out a bone for other women who are navigating dating to say, like, I see that we're all dealing with this, like this issue
Mm.
of, I don't know if these are Peter Pan men or what the deal is, but where a lot of us women are negotiating, constantly meeting men who are like, oh, no, 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 I'm not monogamous. So,
Right. And it's interesting because, well, I have a lot of thoughts about what I want Offa to do, but obviously I am neither the author of this book nor am I the protagonist of this book, but you do, yeah, you never really let us settle somewhere. There's no happy ending here. I guess the closest to happy ending is that it feels like Afa in many ways finds her people.
yes, yes, she is recruited by a different department, which is 100% about the indigenous perspective. And so that is the happy ending. But I did not want to write a traditional love story where the girl ends up with the boy. I purposely wanted to write something where the woman finished the novel single.
Yes, and that brings me to my next question, which is would you ever consider like a sequel to this book?
So many people have asked me that, and to be honest with you, I am jotting down ideas for a sequel. This book took 5 years to write, so obviously it wouldn't be very quick, but I am jotting down ideas and I am exploring it. I feel like I need to have enough experiences to write about because so much of my writing is based on my experiences because that's authentic and true.
Mm-hmm.
And so I mean, coincidentally, I am flying to Brazil this Sunday for 2 weeks.
Wow.
And so I feel like I'm trying to fit in as many experiences as I can in this life so I have something to write about. So the answer is yes, I am considering a sequel, but I'm trying to amass enough interesting experience to write about.
Yes, I see that, but I'm going to go out on a limb and say that I bet you do have enough experiences to write about. And I obviously, how would I know? But I think you really set this up for a sequel because we want to know a lot of things. We want to know, first of all, about Afa's romantic decision because she's sort of on the cusp of that
Yes.
when we end this novel.
Yes.
We want to know this next step in this new position. And now, if she does continue this whole thing, she's on a completely different side of this issue.
Yes.
And so I think that you have so much experience in all of these main conflicts that we want to know more about. I don't know. That's just my opinion, is that you've listed these things that you've done. And those are kind of where you've left us on these at the novel, where we want to know more about her choices and about the work that she does now.
Well, this is helpful for me to hear because just hearing what you want to know more about makes me think, well, what are the answers to these questions? I think, so often what makes for a good piece of writing starts with questions.
Right.
Because my question when I wrote this book was, how do I illustrate this conflict? Um, and I feel like I did it, but there's, so much about Afa that could be expanded on. But even hearing your questions informs me. And I really appreciate them. Thank you. Because I feel like I just really want to do a sequel justice.
I think you will. I think you will. Yeah, she's compelling and she's now, I mean, you set up such a huge question, which is like, don't you want to save the world with this thing? And I feel like trying to reconcile this with this spiritual practice is so hard. And I really, really, really also want Afa to have another encounter with the water mamas. I really do. I want to
Yeah.
see, I think that aspect of it, it seems to me very much that like she has a connection with them, whether she wants it or not.
Yes.
And I would love to see her now on this other side fighting for Indigenous rights. Maybe the issue is still the same. What would an encounter with the water mamas look like then? What is she going to say to this potential love interest? Who are the people in her new position at the UN? Because that is going to be complex as well, who maybe are not what they seem, which is what the environmentalist was kind of like, oh, he's so great, he's heroic. And then as the novel went on, you were like, he's kind of, he's kind of really
Dystopic. I tried to write it as
yes.
dystopic. Like you sign on, it's kind of like in the Dune novels. Paul, so many people see it that as the hero's journey, but Paul goes very dark. He becomes a dark hero. And I don't know if he even is a hero, because of how
Mm.
dark he goes with bringing on war and by the way, I am talking about the movie, so I don't want anyone in the audience to I've not read the books, but I'm just talking about the arc of the movies. And I feel like when I see, in the third Dune movie how Paul is portrayed as very dark, I kind of wanted to do that same thing when I wrote her boss Kwame. I wanted him to appear as the hero, African man, a man of color who, represented, a more marginalized community, who comes in, who's an environmentalist, like all these things that we really revere. And then he turns out to be this dystopic autocrat, technocrat, pushing for these engineering solutions against the will of indigenous people. So I really tried to present people who seem as heroes as not, and then present people who don't seem as heroes as maybe they are. Like the
Mm-hmm.
Vishnu character, he perhaps seemed like a flawed character, but he actually had so much value in the end. And so I tried to play with this idea of like dystopia, even among individuals.
Right, right. And just to mention that Vishnu is the person we're talking about who's the potential love interest
Yes, who's the
of
biologist
Alpha.
who's working
Alpha.
with the Macuxi, documenting their worldview.
Right, right. Yeah, I think I really, when I finished the book, I was like, okay, I'm ready for the sequel right now because it's a big issue. There are lots of complicated conflicts in this. Afa's really compelling. She's a little bit, despite her backstory, she's a little bit naive, but you
Yes.
see her becoming less naive
Yes.
throughout the novel. And so I feel like I'm ready to see her sort of grow in that belief in herself because that's something she really struggles with is that she does make a huge turning point, but her her belief that she can decide what she thinks is right as opposed to taking orders from Kwame, the UN boss. So I do want to keep seeing her how she grows in this next incarnation and seeing who the complicated characters in the UN are and also the water mamas and you know kind of exploring more. There were a lot of people even within the Makushi environment who sort of they were not warm and fuzzy. They
Yes.
were not cuddly.
No,
And
no.
I just think you have so many characters to go with and that Afa is just such a strong, protagonist to encounter these because she's very, very um, ethical. She's very compassionate. She's very empathic. So it's really, I just think there's so much there. So
Yeah,
please don't take 5 years.
and I really did want to make her arc to be a woman that didn't quite believe in herself to a woman who truly did have a sense of her own agency and
Mm,
identity and took a stand. So that was the arc I wanted to write for her.
right.
And it's interesting because my editor kept saying, put yourself in Afa, put yourself in Afa. And at first I hadn't written her anything like me, but I felt that my editor said so many times, give Afa your idiosyncrasies or give her your qualities and make her real and make her complex. So I did end up writing some of my own you know, processes I've gone through to become, an independent woman. Like I did try to include that in her arc because I felt that was real for me and it would be real for her and real for the audience.
Mm. Yeah, that's why I'm really happy you're going back to Brazil, but I also think that you do have so much life experience that would enable you to at least get a good chunk of this sequel down.
Well, let's see. Maybe I'll start writing it in Brazil. Who knows?
Yeah, that would be amazing. Well, so it was so fun to talk to you. I have been wanting to ask you a lot of questions since I finished reading Water Mamas. Where can people find Water Mamas?
So, Water Mamas can be ordered at any independent bookstore. It is in all the bookstore catalogs. So, in your local bookstore, you can go and have it ordered there. If you want an easier approach, there is Amazon.com. It's available there too. I also have a Substack if you are interested in just reading some nonfiction about international environmental thoughts and mythologies and current events. Um, my Substack is Mona Shomali at the Substack website. You can just enter my name and yeah, and my artwork also, a lot of it has to do with these same issues. I have a whole environmental collection where it's called Invisible Stains, and I'm asking the
Mm,
question, what would we do if environmental issues were more visible, because so much of, chemical pollution is invisible, whether it's in the air, in the water. And so, yeah, I have a whole environmental series in my painting. So yeah, and that's at monashomali.com. So there's a whole bunch of ways to engage. If you are interested, I actually used to teach a course called International Environmental Governance at the graduate level. So if you are interested in mythology and how different cultures manage their environments, I feel like my whole body of work sort of speaks to that in different ways.
Wow. I'm so glad you brought up that series because I really loved that series of your paintings. So I hope people will go check that out. Invisible Stain, is that what you?
Invisible Stains is the name of the
Yes.
collection, yes.
Yes. So before we say goodbye, I just want to say that your life experience and your work that you've done is really inspiring to me. And I'm so happy that you've expressed it creatively in this way. So thank you for doing it. Thanks for continuing this work. It's really enabled you to produce such compelling stories and images around it.
Thank you so much. And I have to say, I'm such a fan of your podcast, even the name. I think the name is
Oh.
best name for a podcast. I know anyone I told the name of this podcast, they were like, "Oh my God, that's so compelling." So I think just, you know, dedicating a podcast to art that heals wounds is just incredible. So thank you for having me as a guest.
I'm thrilled. Thank you for that. And I'm so glad you came.
Thank you so much.
You're listening to Art Heals All Wounds. Thank you so much to Mona Shomali for coming on the show to talk about her book, Water Mamas. I'll put all of the info for Mona in the show notes so that you can get a copy of her book and also check out her paintings. Thank you for listening today. I'm not using social media at the moment, but you can always reach me at my website, arthealsallwoundspodcast.com. The music you've heard in this podcast is by Kichwa and Lobo Loco.